There's a new wind blowing across the earth. It's bringing with it a brand new birth. The lamb and the lion will lay down side by side. They will live together in a brand new world.
It was through synchronicity that at a particular time in my life, I felt this inner urge to meditate or share spiritual practice in a group. And I didn't know where this came from, Caroline. It was very strange to me.
I think a lot of people feel that. A lot of people feel an awakening or an urge to participate in something spiritual without knowing what to do about it. But you found something came into your life.
Well, it wasn't so much engaging in a spiritual practice, because I have done that all of my life, but it was wanting to be part of a group experience, engaging in sacred sitting and meditation, and being privy to a teacher speaking to us as this community that gathered together. That was the surprise, because up until that point, I had been very private in my spiritual practice, very alone. I loved the solitude. I loved the freedom that, that gave me. When I was young, I was brought up Roman Catholic, so it was very strict in terms of a religious upbringing. But as I became an adult and moved away into my own sense of spirituality that I felt in integrity with, I was still alone in my practice. So the surprise was, I had this urge, like, I want to sit with other people. So one day I shared this with a colleague after we had had a meeting. This was in my boardroom downtown, and he said, his name is John Kuchenthal, and I'm forever grateful to him. He said, "Oh, Connie," he said, "I just heard of somebody who came from England. He hasn't been here in Vancouver long, and he's a spiritual teacher. Maybe he'll come and lead meditation in your offices." And I said, "John, look, try, see what happens." So the next week to the day, because it was a Wednesday that this came up in conversation after a serious business meeting, the next week, 5:30, this very gentle knock on the door, and a number of us had gathered at my invitation, and I opened the door and in walked Eckhart Tolle.
What was your response when you very first met him? What did you think?
He was not what I expected. He didn't have a robe, he didn't have a turban, a beard. I thought, what a sweet, unassuming, humble man. Eckhart's quite small, not diminutive, but his structure is quite small. And then when he spoke with such authority, but softness. So I think, Caroline, by the end of that first session, and I can't call it meditation, what do you call it, sacred sitting? You can't put a label on that spiritual experience. I recognized Eckhart for a profound and timely teacher, especially for the West. And so after that, Caroline, we would meet week after week, and Eckhart would feed us the spiritual jnana in little tablespoons. And each week we would come back and we would all testify to the shift, the deepening of our inner stillness and our awareness. That's how powerful it was. So now the world is wanting to be in the presence of Eckhart. And I go back to those early days, and there we were, 4, 6, 12, sometimes 20 of us. We never knew who would show up. And we had such privilege to be receiving in such close proximity to his presence that exuded, through his physical form, the teaching. It was blessed.
And one thing led to another. You went from a boardroom having this urge to have a spiritual experience with other people, to meeting Eckhart, to doing his practices and learning from him as a teacher. Now, how did all of that lead to your decision to become a publisher? Had you wanted to be a publisher? Was it
Never,
something you
never,
dreamed of
never.
doing?
That's about life. It's full of surprises. I never intended to be a publisher. As the weeks went on, and Eckhart and I had, I believe, you can ask him to see if he would confirm this, but almost an instant, very deep bonding and a sense of oneness. When Eckhart spoke to me, it was as if I was speaking to my true self. So time went on, and I heard by the by that he was writing a book, and I thought, that's fantastic to get his teaching out so that more people can, access it. And it was one day after a session. Everyone had left with the exception of my colleague David Hughes. David and I were with Eckhart. And before we left, Eckhart said, "Constance, will you be my publisher?"
But you weren't even a publisher.
No.
Did you know anything about publishing?
No. But I was a management consultant, and I had gone into different companies, different industries, really not knowing about the uniqueness of them, and that was part of my preparation. I had a client, a huge, international cement company. Now, what do I know about cement? Yeah. You learn about cement, and so I thought, publishing. I'll learn about publishing. So I bought 2 self-publishing books, and they were my guide.
But was it that easy? I mean, if someone says, "I'd like you to be my publisher," and you've never published before, you must have had some moments of wondering if this was really right for you, or did you just feel that it was?
Caroline, that's an excellent question. Firstly, I was a bit taken aback because it never really entered my mind that Eckhart would ask me. Secondly, when he asked me, of course, the ego surfaced, and it was, I've never done this before. Am I going to do a good job? What if I fail Eckhart? How am I going to find time to do this with a busy practice? And where am I going to find the money to boot? I didn't know how much it cost to bring a book to print at that stage. Now I have a pretty good idea. But on another level, not surprising at all.
And you must have felt that since the book and the teachings were so powerful to you, you had an investment in wanting other people to understand those same things. Can you speak a little bit about that? What impact you thought that Eckhart Tolle's book might have on other people?
I never really even went that far, and I don't even know if Eckhart went that far. We didn't know how this book would be received. First-time author, first-time publisher, first-time graphic artist, everything. We were all absolute babies with no experience going into this. What we did have was we had a clear sense that this was part of our purpose work for this lifetime. So when Eckhart and I joined together in oneness to put this book out, playing our respective roles, we didn't know whether 6 people would read it, 60, 6 million, 60 million. And it really didn't matter because we knew we had to do it. We felt compelled. And then after that it was, okay, let's see where life wants to take this. And we found out.
Namaste Publishing seems to me to have a very different vision from a lot of publishing houses. To begin with, because it seems that a lot of publishing houses find a book that they think can really sell and sell well, and they push that. And it seems like underneath Namaste Publishing is something that is much more powerful, much more real for you than any of the financial, economic, sales, than anything else. Can you speak about that?
I never sought to be a publisher. I never sought out other authors. They came to me through what I believe to be the law of attraction.
And I'd like to talk a little bit about what the teachings are. What did you learn from Eckhart Tolle? What does he say in his book? Why is this so powerful?
Well, I think what Eckhart was able to do was to just evoke from me, and I believe from other readers, the awareness they already have. But their egoic mind has been blocking them from owning.
What's an egoic mind?
the easiest way I could express what the ego is it's a false, limited sense of self born out of fear. And therefore we believe we are weak and we need to be afraid because this world is out there that is threatening. And so we have to defend ourselves against others in order to protect our survival, our life. That is not who we are.
Now, a lot of people would say that that's the reality of the world that we live in, that there's war and there's starvation and there's trauma, there's abuse and there's poverty and stress. And
when you look at war, conflict, famine, there's competition, there's I need to survive, I need to be better than, I need to be safe, it's me against you, it's us against them, it's the United States against Iraq. It is born of separation thinking. The ego is isolated. It breaks things down, and that's why the mind, the thinking mind, is its force, because the mind does that as well. So if you're identified with your thinking mind, you're identified with your egoic self. So Eckhart, came along and really helped us just see what we have already known, but the ego mind had been covering up. I attended one of his teachings. I used to attend more than I can now. And he had this huge audience. I believe it was at Rhinebeck, New York, Omega campus for one of the retreats. And people came from all over, not only the United States and Canada, but from Europe as well. And so Eckhart always begins his teachings sitting in stillness. And the first words he said were, my, oh my, it's really interesting how far some of you traveled just to sit with yourself. So, it says a lot.
it does.
Yeah.
I think it says a lot about people in our society, how much they hunger for something else. That we are very bombarded, in a sense, by needs and stress and materialism, and a lot of people really hunger for something else. It sounds like you did when you were in the boardroom and first heard about Eckhart Tolle. Why is it so powerful?
Well, because at that time, let's go back to when I had this inexplicable kind of urge to sit in a sangha and share spiritual practice and community. That obviously came from what I call my inner grower. It was prompting me to grow spiritually. So Eckhart arrived when the student was ready and assisted me to do just that, to grow into knowing that I didn't need an outside teacher, that everything was within, your inner knower, your inner grower, your inner healer. And Eckhart will always say, don't look at me. Do not look at the teacher. Look at the teaching. Because if we start looking at the teacher, we've created an idol. It's somebody outside of ourselves, separate from ourselves, that's different from ourselves, and in some way better because they've been given the label teacher. So Eckhart will always point you back to the fact that you already know this. And so as we develop that inner trust, and through spiritual practice of entering into stillness, where you get in touch with the core of your being, you develop this joy and confidence in living, and a trust for life itself.
Well, what does it mean to enter into an inner stillness?
Well, in the leap, I say that stillness is the foundation for this evolutionary leap, which I feel we are about to take. The greatest discovery of the end of the last century and the beginning of this was that the human species had evolved sufficiently in our consciousness to actually continue to evolve consciously and not by haphazard forces called, I guess, survival of the fittest. So imagine, for the first time in the evolutionary timeline of our species, we have choice. Are we going to evolve as a species, or are we going to go the way of the dinosaurs? And if we are going to evolve, what do we want to evolve to? We have choice.
Why now? Why is there an evolution happening now? Why not 100 years ago or 200 years in the future?
Again, that's a really good question, because look around. Are we in crisis? Yeah,
Yes.
really. But when you look at the flow of evolution from 14 billion years ago, when we had the Big Bang, to now, that evolutionary impulse has always been with us. And when we see the leaps that have taken place in evolution over the last 14 billion years, we see that crisis has always driven an evolutionary leap. Crisis is the driver of quantum leaps in evolution. That's why I feel we're on the verge of a quantum leap if we choose to exercise our free choice to evolve as a species and how we would like to evolve.
One of the things that makes any form of spiritual or enlightenment thinking so different now from in previous times is that we have access to an enormous wealth of technology.
We've seen an explosion in technology, which has really allowed us to communicate with one another in a way we have never been able to, which means instantly and globally. So we can look at our technological powers, and they're vast. And we can look at our military powers, and they're vast. So much of human intelligence has gone into these powers. How are we going to use them? And so what I feel is that there's been a lag in terms of our spiritual evolution to catch up with, and therefore be responsible in how we're going to wield these new powers. The brain hasn't even caught up yet, and that's part of the contribution of one of my authors as to how we can assist the brain to quickly evolve and get its balance and harmony back, so that we're not victims of its imbalance, which causes hormonal imbalance, chemistry imbalance, illness in the body, psychosomatic illness, the very real things like anxiety and depression and insomnia and all of that. So we are trying to catch up. We are trying to catch up. But even the brain is just the hardware system. What we can use immediately is our spiritual practice, so that spiritually we are where we should be, which means being very conscious and aware that we are the divine, that we are all the divine, that there's no separation in us at the divine level. We are different. We're sitting here. We have different names, or from different ages, family backgrounds, and all that. But what we have in common is our spiritual reality. Eckhart calls it presence. I can call it stillness. Every life form, every person is one with you in that. And so that's why in my book, The Leap, I say in order to make this evolutionary leap in consciousness, we have to move from separation thinking to unity consciousness.
Now, what about the people who might be watching this and say, well, I don't have time for stillness. I don't have time to read a book. I don't have time to do any kind of classroom. I'm single moms working 2 jobs, dads who can't pay the rent. You know, what about those people? How do they find stillness? Or is this something that only some people can tap into?
No, everyone can tap into it. It's our essential nature. Stillness is our essential nature. It's just that we've been so conditioned to look outside of ourselves to find ourselves. And also, the mind-created world is so frenetic and so noisy and so all-demanding that it's really easy to get lost in the world and lose yourself when you get lost in the world. I really understand when people say that. You know, I've got 3 small children, my husband travels, I have, you know, the lion's share of the responsibility. Where can I find time to sit in stillness. And all I can say is really try a few conscious deep breaths throughout the day, and try and do that more frequently whenever you can, because that's where you're going to find your strength. That's where you're going to find your grounding, your succor, your guidance, your healing. I don't think there's anything more important you can do for your inner health, physical as well as your overall well-being, than to inhabit the body, to just go into the body, feel the inner life force within the body. Feel that. That animating force is very close to who you really are. And when you sit in that field, the benefits, I mean, they go on and on. They just, it's maximum for the time you invest in that sacred sitting by going enter into the body. That's why we have our bodies. We are not our bodies. Our bodies are used to help as vehicles through which our true nature can express. So to get to it, it's ironic, it's paradoxical. But the new consciousness, you have to deal with paradox and contradictions, because nothing's that defined. It's so big. So you have to enter into the body, feel the inner energy body and the stillness, which you will find there. And the benefits to your life, manifold. Your day will become smoother. Things will just fall into place. Things you questioned, the answers will come to you. It's like you cannot not afford to make time for stillness in your life.
You talked about when you met Eckhart Tolle, the feeling that you had that the two of you connected on some level. You felt a connection with him as a person. Is it possible for technology, the internet, to relay a feeling of connection?
We know that books are more than paper and words. What
do you mean by that?
Well, that not all books, a lot of books are just paper and words. But some books can be more than that. It's like an artist who comes from stillness or presence. Any original thought, any creativity comes from that place. So when you're writing a book from that place, which we can call presence or stillness or your true being, your divinity within, the energy from that is immediately transferred into the manifestation, the form that it's going to take. And you can convey the energy of presence through words, through paintings, through music. It's what is the source. And if you're coming from your inner source, the causative level of all things, then that can be transmitted. We know it happens through our books. I can tell you that when I saw the first DVD we shot of Eckhart, and I was sitting at home, it was in the middle of the afternoon, I thought I'd turn it on, see what we captured here. And I had even a more profound sense of stillness and connection watching that DVD than I did when I was with him in person. How can that happen? You know why? Because I think we've been conditioned to look at the TV and we're drawn into it. And his presence and the power of that presence came across without fail as equally, and for me at that particular time, even more powerfully than sitting with him live in a teaching. I can't explain it. I went into instant stillness, tears rolled down my face. It was so beautiful that I could use a visual medium to get to my beingness and put me right in presence instantly. So I have absolute faith that we can do this through the visual medium.
You are a person who was led by fate or serendipity to start a business, Namaste Publishing, and it's led to enormous success, not just monetarily, economically, but it sounds like on an internal level as well. Do you see this as a movement that people in industries elsewhere are making in television, internet producers. Do you see this as a new vision for business?
That is my prayer. Beyond that, I see it as inevitable. I see it as the next step in the expression of the evolution of human consciousness, that we use all forms of communications to be vehicles for the expression of the new consciousness, which is emerging in ourselves. We are the new consciousness sitting here. We are the evolution of the species. So to bring programming that is heart-based, comes from beyond the mind, but uses all we have, words and music and visual effects and all of that, to help express the new consciousness that's pressing to emerge on the planet. I think it's inevitable. I think it's inevitable because I believe we're going to make the leap.
When you talk about this evolutionary leap, this shift in human consciousness, you discuss it as a very connected experience, but we have typically thought of evolution or spiritual consciousness as a very private matter. Can you speak a little bit about that, about the role of media in a very connected evolution?
Well, media is still based on competition and on the bottom line. And if it's going to be continued to be driven by those two factors, we're not going to move. So changes in the media will come from enlightened leadership. Just as when I was a consultant, the changes that took place within organizations, no matter if we brought in a strategic plan, great strategic plan, a wonderful performance management system, we spent weeks team building, you can go on and on. The organizations that changed, that became more loving, that became healthier, and the bottom line, it was just a fruit of that. Just as our work, the abundance, the financial abundance, it's just a fruit. It's a side effect, one of the many side effects that you're going to need. So in these organizations, the ones that I saw shift, and there was some permanent change, because you can go in and you can do all this stuff and you leave and did I do anything? Was I, why did they pay me? Nothing happened. Same old, same old. But the ones where they did shift, it was because they had enlightened leadership. So boy, do I believe in the leadership difference. You need one enlightened person, 2, 3, 4, wherever, in their respective spheres of influence, to say, I am going to start using my authority, my profile, my capital, my structures, my people, to start doing conscious work, whether it's building a home, whether it's putting on a television program, whether it's putting a book out, whether it's teaching other teachers how to be more present with children, who knows? So wherever you are, it's really the individuals who are using their position and their respective spheres of influence intentionally to be a vehicle through which consciousness can express and help the species thereby evolve to a higher order.
How have you changed as a person from the person that you used to be in a boardroom prior to meeting Eckhart Tolle, starting Namaste Publishing, having all these experiences?
I think profound changes have taken place, and they continue to take place. I can attest to the fact that up until my mid-30s, I was in the grip of ego. I've been there. I know how painful it is. I know how straitjacketed you can get when you are ego-based. Everything threatens you. Your reputation. You make one mistake. What's your client going to say? Somebody looks at you the wrong way. Oh, what did I do wrong? Anxiety. Where does that come from? Stress. Where does that come from? Having to defend this concept of yourself, this little self. energy and the pain that goes along with that. So I was there, and I was in that generation where women, were given an opportunity. And I felt, oh boy, I'm going to show the world. I am woman, here I come. Can you hear me roar? And I tried to combine cookies, kids, career, to an insane level of perfection. Did my children suffer? Yeah. Was I a conscious parent? Not very. I look at my daughter now, who has a child and is expecting her second. Oh my God, what a conscious parent. And I did the best I could where I was. So, I have grown continuously. I know what it's like to be in the grip of the ego. I know what it's like to be breaking free of it. And I know what it's like to be hopefully almost free of it. So liberating.
The person that you're describing yourself as being wrapped up in the ego seems so strikingly different from who you are today, Constance. You are a very happy, enthusiastic, joyful, and seemingly confident person. Yeah. You must have doubts. Do you have days where you wonder what you're doing? Why did I do this?
No, never. I don't think I've ever looked back, ever had a doubt. As a matter of fact, I'm fearless. I'm actually fearless. The only thing that concerns me is the body. Do I have enough energy? Is my nervous system strong enough to step up? It's more that. So I really, really have to work at generous self-care, because I'm here to serve, I'll step up. And there's no fear in that. No fear at all. Whereas before, I would have been worrying, I would have studied, I would have made sure I wasn't going to make a mistake. And oh God, to be free of that cloak it's a liberation. It's a whole new life.
What would you say to people who are suffering now, who are wrapped up in all the stresses that you've just described?
Well, I wouldn't be sorry for them, because in my book, The Leap, I say compassion trumps sympathy. Sympathy is when you look at somebody and see them as a victim, and this shouldn't be so. Compassion is when you look and see what the person really is, and therefore draw that out of them.
You've talked about finding inner stillness, but what are the spiritual conscious steps a person takes, and also the physical, the practical steps a person takes to transform their life in the way it seems that yours has?
Well, I think you want to start with intention, which is causative. That's, it's causative, it's creative. So you first have to truly want to change, for your life to be different. It's like organizations I went into, and we would do a visioning process. Everybody knew the perfect organization they wanted to work with. Okay, wonderful vision statement. We'd all say it in harmony. Okay, where are you now? The reality. You have to have the motivation to close the gap. And unfortunately, still today, most people are motivated by pain. So their lives have to be in such pain that they say, there has to be a better way. And tell me, and I'll try it for myself and see if there is. And that's the only way people can ever know, is by putting something to the test and seeing if it works for them. And a spiritual practice, if it works for them, they will see themselves becoming more peaceful, more loving, more joyful human beings. As I look at my work in the world, always being Namaste based, always wanting to share with people and hold the mirror up to them and say, look at how beautiful you are. Can you not see the divine within? As a teacher, I had a sphere of influence with all of my students in my various classrooms. When I became a department chairman, I also had influence with the teachers in my department, and through them to their students as well. When I became a management consultant, of course, my sphere of influence got bigger because I was dealing with corporations and groups of corporations and all of the employees there. As a publisher, my sphere of influence continued again because look at the millions of people we've been able to reach through our publications. And so I feel very much that I am being pulled along by this evolutionary impulse, pulled along, not pushed along, pulled along, and that I will be doing something different, and that form of my work will allow a greater sphere of influence for what I do or what I can contribute or how consciousness wants to express through me. And the predictable one is through the internet, through the visual media. I feel very much that's the next step.
What would you like to see happen in humanity? This evolution is taking place. Where do you hope things might be in 25 years, 50 years, 100?
I think it's going to be decided before then. I think we have to shift from separation consciousness, which is fear-based, to unity consciousness, which is love-based. We have to start thinking that it's not only about us, it's about all of us, that other interest is really self-interest. Countries, I mean, hey, look around. When does the penny drop? I mean, it's right there. How can they not see that global interest is national interest? Why don't we act the truth? We know it. Science has proven it without a doubt. Within our being, we know that we are one. We've got to start thinking globally. So I would love to see the shift from self-interest to other interest, to from national interest to global interest. I gave a radio interview not too long ago, and the host had established a world flag. And when he asked me if I'd be on the radio show, I said, well, if you send me one of those flags, perfect. I mean, here we are. We're the world. That will bring a unity within the species that will bring sharing and caring at a level that is going to be required for us to break out of our dysfunctions.
What can one person do to change anything, to help other people, to raise human consciousness?
Well, I really understand how people look around and say, what can I do? What can I do to stop poverty in Africa? What can I do to bring peace to Iraq? What can I do to stop the spread of AIDS? And when you look at it like that, it gives you an excuse to kind of, well, give up and resign yourself to the status quo, which isn't good enough. We know we can't continue with the status quo and survive as a planet, because the status quo is only going to perpetuate more of the same and escalate the violence and all the negative forces on the planet. So what you can do is only do what you can in your individual life, and it truly is to be the truth you want to see in others. If you want to see peace, bring peace within, extend peace to others. If you want to see a more equitable share of the world's wealth, then do what you can to share out of your abundance. If you don't, at least hold to the intent that if you did have abundance, that's what you would do. There's a lovely story that I'd like to tell you about Mahatma Gandhi, who said, first, be the truth you want to see in others. And it goes like this, that Mahatma Gandhi once a week would make time for visitors. And on one such occasion, there was a woman who came to him with her son. And she said, Mahatma, you've got to help me, Mahatma. My son, he eats sweets. He eats so many sweets, he's getting sick. I can't do anything. I have disciplined him. I have urged him not to eat so many sweets. He keeps eating sweets. Mahatma, Mahatma, please tell him not to eat sweets. He'll listen to you. And Mahatma looked at the lady and at the son, back at the lady, paused and said, come back in 3 days. 3 days later, the mother and son came back at the appointed time. Gandhi immediately, upon seeing them, stood up and walked towards them, turned to the son and said, don't eat sweets. And the mother said, Mahatma, Mahatma, what? Don't eat sweets? You could have told him that 3 days ago. And Mahatma said, 3 days ago, I was still eating sweets. He knew that his words of advice would have no power, no efficacy, would not, be listened to by the son unless he was living the truth he was advising others to live. That's it. That's what we can do.
Great advice. Constance Kellough, it's been so wonderful to talk to you.
And you too, Carol.
When the spirit of love
Thank you. Namaste.
comes
Namaste.
shining through, lighting the way for me and you, we will all know our purpose and our divine destiny, and we will all be at peace in a brand